My mother's annual Christmas dinner had always been more of a performance than a family gathering. The crystal chandelier casting its golden glow over the mahogany dining table, the fine china plates perfectly arranged, the expensive wine poured into delicate glasses. It was all part of her carefully orchestrated show of family perfection. But this year was different. The usual tension that simmered beneath our polite smiles had turned into something heavier, darker. Grandma Rose's empty chair at the head of the table seemed to mock our pretense of normalcy. "Sarah, darling, how's the hospital?" My mother's voice carried that familiar note of pride as she addressed my older sister. "I heard you're being considered for chief of surgery." I took a slow sip of water, already knowing what would come next. Sarah's achievements had always been the centerpiece of these family dinners, each accomplishment displayed like another jewel in my mother's crown. "Actually, Mom," Sarah's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her wine glass, her engagement ring catching the light. "I got the position last week. Youngest chief of surgery in the hospital's history." The table erupted in congratulations. My father beamed, my mother dabbed at her eyes with an embroidered napkin, and my younger brother Michael, the successful corporate lawyer, raised his glass in a toast. "To Sarah," he announced, continuing the Bennett family legacy of excellence. I stared down at my untouched dinner, fighting the urge to point out that saving their struggling investment firm last year through my anonymous consulting work was also quite an achievement. But they didn't know about that, just like they didn't know about my thriving international business consultancy or the fact that I'd helped 3 Fortune 500 companies avoid bankruptcy in the past year. No, to them, I was still just Olivia, the disappointment, the black sheep who'd refused to follow the prescribed path of medicine or law, the daughter who'd walked away from a promising position at their investment firm to start her own business. "And what about you, Olivia?" My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. "Still doing that. What do you call it? Freelance work?" The way she said freelance made it sound like I was selling handmade crafts at local fairs, rather than running a multi-million-dollar consultancy. "I'm doing fine, Mother." I kept my voice neutral, years of practice helping me maintain my composure. "Fine." Sarah's perfectly plucked eyebrows rose. "At your age, you should be more than just fine. Remember when you left the firm? Dad gave you such a wonderful opportunity, and you just threw it away." I remembered that day clearly. I discovered serious discrepancies in the firm's accounting, tried to warn my father, but he dismissed my concerns. 2 years later, those same issues nearly bankrupted them. I'd stepped in anonymously through my consultancy to save them, but they never knew. "Sarah's right." My mother sighed dramatically. "If only you'd listened to us, you could have had a real career by now. Instead," she gestured vaguely at me, as if my entire existence was somehow lacking. Speaking of real careers, Michael chimed in, straightening his designer tie. "My firm just landed the Maxwell account. $3 billion in assets." He smirked in my direction. "But I suppose that's a bit beyond your scope, sis. How's your little consulting thing going?" I thought about the confidential documents sitting in my home office, papers showing that the Maxwell account was actually being managed by my company, with Michael's firm handling only the basic legal work. But again, they didn't know that. "It's going well enough," I replied softly, cutting into my salmon with deliberate precision. "Well enough to afford that dress." Sarah's eyes flicked over my simple black sheath dress. "I could take you shopping sometime. I know some lovely consignment shops." My dress was actually a hand-tailored piece from a small Parisian atelier, costing more than Sarah's monthly salary. But they didn't need to know that either. "That's so thoughtful of you, Sarah." I murmured, fighting back a smile as I thought of the Channel bags gathering dust in my closet. The conversation drifted back to Sarah's accomplishments, Michael's cases, and my mother's social circle. I sat quietly, letting their words wash over me like background noise. My thoughts kept drifting to Grandma Rose, the only person in this family who'd ever really seen me. She passed away 3 months ago, but her last words to me still echoed in my mind. Patience, my dear. Sometimes the best revenge is letting them underestimate you until the perfect moment. The perfect moment was coming sooner than they knew. Tomorrow morning, the family would gather at Mr. Harrison's office for the reading of Grandma's will. They were all so certain about what would happen. The family estate split between Sarah and Michael, the vacation homes, the investment portfolios, all divided between the successful siblings. But Grandma Rose had always been cleverer than anyone gave her credit for. She'd seen through the family's pretense, recognized their hollow achievements for what they were. Most importantly, she'd known exactly what I'd built, while they were all too busy looking down their noses at me. I heard from Mr. Harrison today, my mother announced, pulling me from my thoughts. The will reading is at 10 tomorrow. I assume you'll be there, Olivia? Though really, it's more a formality for you. Of course, Mother. I dabbed my lips with my napkin, hiding my smile. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Just try not to be disappointed, Sarah added with false sympathy. We all know Grandma Rose understood the importance of keeping the family legacy in capable hands. If only they knew that Grandma Rose had been my first investor, that she'd helped me establish my company, while they were all dismissing my dreams as foolish fantasies. If only they knew that their precious family legacy was already in my hands. But they would find out soon enough. Tomorrow, their carefully constructed world of superiority would come crashing down. Tomorrow, they would learn that the black sheep they dismissed for so long was actually the wolf they should have feared. I raised my water glass, offering them a smile that none of them could quite read. To family, I said quietly. They all echoed the toast, their glasses clinking with expensive certainty. None of them noticed the glint in my eye, the slight curve of my lips that wasn't quite a smile. None of them had any idea what was coming. As I drove home that night, my phone buzzed with a text from Mr. Harrison. Everything is prepared for tomorrow, Ms. Bennett, just as your grandmother arranged. I didn't reply. Instead, I parked my car in the private garage of my penthouse apartment, the one my family thought was a modest rental in a developing neighborhood, and made my way to my home office. The wall of windows offered a spectacular view of the city skyline, lights twinkling like stars against the dark sky. Opening my safe, I pulled out a thick manila envelope. Inside was Grandma Rose's letter to me, written 6 months before her death. I'd read it so many times I knew the words by heart, but tonight I needed to see them again. My dearest Olivia, they never saw you clearly, did they? Too busy preening in their own reflections to notice the quiet strength you were building. But I saw you. I saw how you turned their dismissal into determination, their doubt into drive. Tomorrow, they'll finally see what I've seen all along. The black sheep of the family isn't lost. She's been leading the flock all along. All my love, Grandma Rose. I placed the letter back in the safe, next to the documents that would change everything tomorrow. Then I poured myself a glass of wine, a rare vintage that cost more than Michael's monthly mortgage payment, and settled into my favorite armchair. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Mr. Harrison's law office occupied the entire top floor of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. As I stepped out of the elevator at precisely 9:45 a.m., I couldn't help but smile at the irony. I actually owned this building through one of my shell corporations, not that my family knew that. The reception area was already full. Sarah sat perched on an expensive leather chair, her surgeon's hands fidgeting with her pearl necklace. Michael paced by the window, his Italian leather shoes clicking against the marble floor. My parents sat together, my mother's face carefully composed, though her fingers drummed restlessly against her designer handbag. "Cutting it rather close, aren't you?" Sarah's voice dripped with disapproval as I walked in. I checked my watch. Still 15 minutes early, but didn't bother responding. Instead, I took a seat near the window, smoothing down my simple black dress. The same one they'd mockingly suggested came from a consignment shop. Now, my mother interjected with forced cheerfulness. "Let's all try to remember what Grandma Rose would want. Family harmony." Michael snorted. "Family harmony? Please, Mother. We all know why we're here. The family estate needs proper management, and some of us," his eyes flickered meaningfully toward me, "clearly aren't equipped for that responsibility." Before I could respond, Mr. Harrison's assistant opened the conference room doors. "The family may enter now." We filed in like actors taking our places on stage. The conference room was impressive, all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. At the head of the long table sat Mr. Harrison, his silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses giving him an appropriately grave appearance. "Good morning, everyone," he began, his voice carrying the weight of 40 years of legal practice. "We're here today for the reading of Rose Eleanor Bennett's last will and testament." I watched my family settle into their seats, all of them wearing nearly identical expressions of barely concealed anticipation. They'd spent the last 3 months since Grandma's death carefully planning how they'd divide her considerable estate. "Before we begin," Mr. Harrison continued, "I must stress that what I'm about to read reflects your grandmother's explicit wishes. She was—" He paused, his eyes meeting mine for a brief moment, "very specific about certain conditions." "Conditions?" My father frowned. "What conditions?" "The estate should simply be divided between the children, as is traditional in our family." Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "Perhaps it's best if I simply read the will." He opened a thick leather portfolio and began. "I, Rose Eleanor Bennett, being of sound mind and body, declare this to be my last will and testament." The initial paragraphs were standard legal language. I watched my siblings grow increasingly impatient, Michael checking his watch, Sarah tapping her perfectly manicured nails against the table. Then came the part they'd been waiting for. "Regarding the distribution of my estate, valued at approximately $48 million. Sarah sat up straighter. Michael stopped checking his phone. "I hereby declare that the entire estate, including all properties, investments, and assets, shall be placed under the sole control of my granddaughter, Olivia Bennett." The silence that followed was absolute. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. "What?" Sarah's voice came out as a strangled whisper. Mr. Harrison continued reading, his voice steady. "However, Olivia will have the authority to distribute portions of the estate to other family members, if and only if she deems them worthy. Her decisions in this matter shall be final and binding." "This is ridiculous," Michael exploded, jumping to his feet. "She can't do this." "I assure you, she can and did," Mr. Harrison replied calmly. "Furthermore, there's more." My mother had gone pale. "More?" "Yes," the will continues. "To ensure my wishes are carried out, I have arranged for all family trust funds, including those previously established for Sarah and Michael Bennett, to be transferred under Olivia's control, effective immediately. The chaos that erupted was exactly what I'd expected. Sarah burst into tears, her perfect makeup beginning to run. Michael started shouting about contesting the will. My mother looked like she might faint. My father stood up, his face red with anger. This is preposterous. Olivia doesn't know the first thing about managing this kind of wealth. She runs a small consulting business, for God's sake. I finally spoke, my voice quiet but clear. Actually, Father, there's something you should know about that small consulting business. Mr. Harrison handed me a folder. I opened it, laying out several documents on the table. Phoenix Global Consulting Group, I began, watching their faces. Ever heard of it? Michael scoffed. Of course. They're one of the largest financial consulting firms in the world. They're the ones who saved Dad's company last year when... His voice trailed off as realization began to dawn. When it was about to go bankrupt, I finished for him. Yes, I know. I'm the one who arranged that bailout. What are you talking about? Sarah demanded. I'm the founder and CEO of Phoenix Global, I said simply. Have been for the past 8 years. Grandma Rose was my first investor. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother's hand flew to her throat, clutching her pearls. My father had gone from red to white, all the blood draining from his face. That's impossible, Michael stammered. Phoenix Global is worth just over $3 billion. I finished for him. Which makes Grandma's $48 million estate seem rather modest in comparison, doesn't it? Sarah's tears had stopped abruptly. But you live in that small apartment. You wear these simple clothes. I couldn't help but smile. That small apartment is a penthouse that costs more than your house, Sarah. And this simple dress? It's custom made by the same designer who refuses to sell to you because you were rude to his staff last year. Why? My mother whispered. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? I asked quietly. You were all so convinced I was a failure, so certain I couldn't succeed without following your prescribed path. It was easier to let you think what you wanted. And Grandma knew. My father's voice was barely audible. She knew everything. I confirmed. She watched all of you dismiss me, underestimate me, mock my choices, and she watched me build something far beyond what any of you have achieved. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. There's one final part of the will I need to read. Everyone turned back to him, still shell-shocked. To my family, he read, I leave you with this lesson. True success isn't measured by titles or appearances, but by character and determination. I've watched you all pride yourselves on your achievements, while belittling the quiet ambition of my beloved Olivia. Today, you learn how wrong you've been. The black sheep of your family has become the shepherd of your flock. I stood up, gathering my papers. Mr. Harrison will provide you all with documents detailing the new financial arrangements. I suggest you review them carefully. Your trust funds will remain intact, but there will be conditions. Conditions? Michael's voice cracked. What conditions? I paused at the door, turning back to face my family. These people who had dismissed me for so long, who were now staring at me like they'd never seen me before. That's for me to decide, I said quietly. After all, I'm no longer the black sheep you can ignore. I'm the one holding the purse strings now. As I walked out of the conference room, I heard Sarah burst into fresh tears, Michael start swearing, and my mother call my name. But I didn't look back. In the elevator, I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. A new notification popped up. Trust fund transfers complete. Everything had changed. But this wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. About finally being seen for who I really was. Grandma Rose would have been proud. The next few weeks were exactly what I'd expected. A storm of desperate attempts to regain control. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, each one more manipulative than the last. From Sarah, "Olivia, we need to talk. I know we've had our differences, but we're still sisters. You can't just cut us off like this." From Michael, "This is completely unfair. I have commitments, investments. I need access to my trust fund." From Mother, "Darling, please. What will people say? The country club is already buzzing with rumors. We need to present a united front." I read each message but didn't respond. Instead, I focused on my work, steering Phoenix Global through a major merger while simultaneously restructuring my family's finances. It was during one of these late nights at the office that my assistant, Lisa, interrupted me. "Miss Bennett, your sister is here." I looked up from my computer screen. Through the glass walls of my corner office, I could see Sarah standing in the reception area. Gone was her usual air of superiority. She looked smaller somehow, uncertain in a way I'd never seen before. "Send her in." Sarah's eyes widened as she took in my office. The spectacular city view, the elegant furnishings, the clear symbols of power and success she'd never imagined I possessed. "This is quite something," she managed, sinking into one of the leather chairs across from my desk. "What do you want, Sarah?" She flinched at my directness. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the will reading. About how we treated you. About all the things we never knew." "You mean all the things you never bothered to ask about," I corrected quietly. "Yes," she whispered. "That too." She took a deep breath. "The hospital board is reviewing my position as chief of surgery. Apparently, some questions have been raised about certain decisions I made." I nodded. I knew all about those decisions, the corners she'd cut, the favors she'd called in, the qualified candidates she'd pushed aside to secure her position. "And you're here because?" "Because I need your help," she admitted, her voice cracking. "Not just with money, but with everything. I've built my whole life on appearances, on what Mother and Father expected. I don't know who I am without that." I studied my sister's face, seeing for the first time the cracks in her perfect facade. "Do you know why Grandma Rose invested in my company?" Sarah shook her head. "Because I showed her a real business plan. Not a name or a title or a designer outfit. Actual substance. She taught me that true success isn't about impressing others. It's about building something meaningful." Tears started rolling down Sarah's cheeks, smearing her expensive mascara. "I never knew her like you did I? I was too busy trying to be perfect." "No," I agreed. "You didn't." I opened my drawer and pulled out a folder. "This contains two things. First, a complete audit of your decisions at the hospital. Second, a plan to correct those mistakes, ethically and legally." Her hands trembled as she took the folder. "Why would you help me after everything?" "Because Grandma Rose didn't make me the executor of her will for revenge. She did it to teach this family a lesson about value. Real value." The next visitor came 3 days later. Michael stormed into my office unannounced, his face red with anger. "You've frozen all my accounts," he shouted. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to my reputation?" I calmly looked up from my computer. "Sit down, Michael." "I will not." "Sit." Down. Something in my voice made him comply. I pulled up a document on my screen and turned the monitor toward him. Do you recognize this? His face went pale. It was a detailed report of every client he'd overcharged, every corner he'd cut, every ethical line he'd crossed in his pursuit of success. How did you? I know everything, Michael. Every shortcut, every lie, every client you've cheated. Did you really think I wouldn't investigate before taking control of the family's finances? He slumped in his chair. What are you going to do? That depends on you. I have a proposal, one that involves you actually earning your success for a change. The hardest conversation came last. My parents requested a meeting at their house, the home I'd grown up in, where I'd spent so many years feeling invisible. They were waiting in the living room, looking oddly diminished. The usual trappings of wealth surrounded them, but somehow they no longer seemed to fit. Olivia, my mother began, we've been talking about everything, about how we treated you. My father cleared his throat. When I nearly lost the company last year, it was you who saved it, wasn't it? Through Phoenix Global? I nodded. Why? He asked. Why help us after how we treated you? Because that's what families should do, I replied. Support each other, not tear each other down to feel superior. My mother started crying softly. We were so wrong about you, so terribly wrong. Yes, I agreed, you were, but that's not why I'm here. I opened my briefcase and took out several documents. These are the new terms for the family trust. There will be changes. They listened in silence as I outlined my conditions. No more trust fund payments without proof of actual work or contribution. No more blank checks for maintaining appearances. Resources would be allocated based on merit, not status. But what will people think? My mother whispered. That's exactly the kind of thinking that got us here, I pointed out. It's time for this family to develop some substance behind the style. 1 month later, I stood in my office, looking out over the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. She was starting over at a smaller hospital, working her way up properly this time. Michael had accepted a junior position at a respected law firm, learning to do things the right way. My parents were adjusting to their new reality, slowly learning to value achievement over appearance. On my desk sat a framed photo of Grandma Rose, her eyes twinkling with that knowing look she always had. Next to it lay her final letter to me, the one I'd only opened after the will reading. My dearest Olivia, by now they know, not just about your success, but about the strength they never saw. Use this power wisely. Not for revenge, but for redemption. Sometimes the black sheep becomes the shepherd not to punish the flock, but to guide them to better pastures. You've built something remarkable, my dear. Now help them build something real of their own. All my love, Grandma Rose. I smiled, touching the letter gently. She had known exactly what she was doing, setting up this elaborate lesson. It was never about the money. It was about forcing my family to finally see the truth about success, value, and what really matters. My phone buzzed again. A message from Sarah. Meeting for coffee tomorrow? I could use some advice about this new position. I texted back, yes. And Sarah? Wear whatever you want. No designer labels required. Looking out at the city lights, I felt at peace. The black sheep had indeed become the shepherd, but not to lord over the flock, to lead them toward something better, something real. Grandma Rose would have liked that.